Have you ever shared something personal with your family honestly, simply to be transparent, and walked away feeling unsettled, even regretful? Maybe it was a conversation about your savings, a comment about a recent ache, or your thoughts on a family situation. And while you expected support, what you received was concern laced with pressure, opinions, judgment, maybe even control. If you're over 65, this moment likely feels familiar, because after a certain age, what we say, and just as importantly, what we don't, starts to shape how others treat us. And not always in ways that preserve our dignity. As we grow older, we are often taught that openness is a virtue, that honesty with loved ones is always the right path. But what no one tells us is that, in our later years, certain truths become too powerful to be shared freely. Not because they're shameful, not because we're hiding, but because sharing them too soon or too freely can erode our peace, our independence, and even how our own family sees us. That's why today we're exploring something many seniors never hear, that wisdom sometimes means knowing what to keep private. This is a conversation built on real-life experience, elderly reflections, and the kind of life lessons that only come from having lived long enough to know what truly matters. Because there is a point in life, not marked by a birthday, but by a quiet realization, where peace becomes more valuable than praise, and independence more sacred than validation. To begin our reflection, we'll explore the first 2 of 5 important truths that seniors over 65 may choose to keep to themselves. Not out of secrecy, but for the sake of self-preservation, clarity, and emotional wisdom. Let's begin with the one topic that seems harmless to share, but can open a floodgate of unwanted pressure: your financial life. David had just turned 66 when he decided to retire. After decades of hard work, first at a steel company, then running his own home repair business, he finally stepped away from the daily grind. With a solid pension, a modest investment account, and a fully paid-off home, he felt proud, comfortable. He had no plans to be extravagant, but he did want to enjoy the fruits of his labor, perhaps travel a bit, donate to his church, and finally buy that second-hand convertible he'd admired for years. One afternoon during a family lunch, his son casually asked, "So Dad, what's your plan with the savings?" "You've done well, right?" David, feeling proud and open, answered honestly. He even gave rough figures. At first, his son seemed impressed, supportive. But in the weeks that followed, David noticed something shift. Little comments, subtle suggestions. "Maybe you should put more aside for the grandkids' college. Are you sure spending on that old convertible is wise? You might want to think about downsizing." What started as a warm, transparent moment became a source of discomfort. His autonomy, the quiet freedom he'd worked so hard for, was now under quiet evaluation. This isn't unique to David. According to a 2022 study published in The Gerontologist, over 60% of seniors who shared full financial details with family members reported a sense of diminished control within a year. The cause? A mix of generational differences, misplaced worry, and sometimes a shift in how family members perceive your resources. Many younger family members, often with the best intentions, begin to project their own financial anxieties or ambitions onto their parents. They offer advice without invitation. They suggest restructuring, rethinking, reallocating. And while some of that input might be valid, it often carries a hidden message. "We think you need help making decisions." And once that thought takes root in the minds of those you love, it can be difficult, sometimes impossible, to change. What's even more complicated is that once a financial detail is shared, it cannot be unshared. A son who now knows you have a sizable retirement account may begin to see your generosity not as kindness, but as obligation. A daughter who learns that you plan to leave most of your estate to charity may wrestle with resentment. It's not always about greed, it's about control. And when others feel entitled to your financial decisions, your freedom becomes their debate. That's why the smartest approach for seniors is often the simplest. Share what's needed, nothing more. If you've prepared a will, good. If you've named a power of attorney, better. If your estate plan is in order, wonderful. But beyond that, the exact size of your savings, how much you've set aside, and what you choose to spend on yourself, those are deeply personal matters. It is not deception to keep them private. It is wisdom, and it is protection. Not just from others' expectations, but from the subtle erosion of your own independence. Now let's move to a second area of life where restraint is just as important: your health. Aging naturally brings new physical challenges. A slower step, an aching joint, changes in sleep, digestion, or energy. These are common, but the way we talk about them, especially with family, can significantly alter how we're perceived. And perception in this context can be everything. Ellen is 68. She walks every morning. She paints every Thursday. Her blood pressure is steady and her heart is strong. But like most people her age, she occasionally wakes up with stiff knees. One morning while chatting with her daughter, she casually mentioned, "My knees have been bothering me a little more lately." The next day, she received 3 texts with article links about supplements. That weekend, her daughter visited with brochures for local physical therapists and even hinted, maybe we should start thinking about a single-level home just in case. Ellen didn't feel supported. She felt boxed in. When seniors share frequent updates about minor health concerns, atches, colds, digestive troubles, well-meaning family often overreact. Why? Because they are younger, less experienced with aging, and quicker to assume every symptom is a sign of decline. Their concern turns into intervention, and their efforts, though loving, can become suffocating. Studies in the Journal of Aging and Mental Health show that seniors who frequently talk about minor health issues are more likely to be perceived by family members as fragile, dependent, or mentally declining, even when those impressions are inaccurate. This leads to suggestions that you take it easy, or get help, or worse, move in with us. These may come from love, but they steal something essential: the quiet confidence of self-management. Moreover, there is a psychological impact to consider. The more you speak about small health issues, the more others begin to see you through the lens of decline. And often unconsciously, you may begin to see yourself the same way. Your identity shifts from being capable to being managed. And that shift doesn't just live in their words, it finds its way into your own mirror. So what's the better way? Keep a private record. Journal your symptoms. Monitor changes. Share meaningful health information with your doctor and, when absolutely necessary, with family. If a condition threatens your ability to live independently or safely, of course, speak up. But know this: you are allowed to process discomfort privately. Silence is not denial, it is discernment. And discretion is not weakness, it is power. If you choose to share something, do so with framing. "My knees are a little stiff, but I'm monitoring it. No need to worry. I've got it under control." These words reaffirm your agency. They remind your family that you are still the same person. In both of these areas, money and health, the temptation to overshare is understandable. We want connection. We want transparency. But as we step into our 70s and then beyond, the definition of connection evolves. It becomes less about constant disclosure and more about mutual respect. It becomes about knowing when silence builds stronger bridges than words ever could. To preserve your peace, sometimes you must protect your privacy. To maintain your independence, sometimes you must choose selective silence. And to live with dignity, you must remember that your story is still yours to tell. As our reflection continues, we'll explore 2 more deeply personal areas: your honest thoughts on family conflicts and the unspoken regrets you carry from the past. Both are powerful. Both can shape the way your family sees you. But how you express them, or don't, can be the key to your emotional freedom. Before you go, take a quiet moment to ask yourself, has sharing certain details ever led to unexpected stress? Have you ever felt diminished rather than empowered after a conversation with family? If so, you're not alone. You're simply human. And this space, this conversation, is here for people like you. People who understand that aging is not the end of wisdom, but its most honest beginning. If this message resonated with you, take a second to reflect. Maybe even write down one thought you're choosing to keep just for yourself. Not as a secret, but as a secret boundary. And if you feel called to support content like this, centered on senior health, emotional well-being, and life lessons from the elderly, feel free to like, subscribe, and share it with someone walking the same path. Until next time, may your thoughts be your own, your silence be your strength, and your peace be protected. There are things we keep to ourselves in this life, not because they don't matter, but because they matter too much to be handed off carelessly. Some truths are simply too tender, too sacred, to give to the wrong moment or the wrong person. And as we age, especially after 65, we begin to see the quiet value in holding those things close. If earlier reflections warned us about oversharing our health or financial worries, then this part touches something even deeper: the emotional world we carry behind our eyes. The thoughts we've had about family, the regrets that live in our hearts, the stories that echo through our minds in the stillness before sleep. Because at some point, the number of memories we carry becomes greater than the number of plans we make. We've learned, often the hard way, that not every word spoken is heard as it was meant. That sometimes the most healing thing we can do is pause. That's where we begin this chapter, at the intersection of silence and wisdom. You see, one of the hardest temptations to resist in later life is the urge to speak into family conflict. At first it feels noble. You've lived through more holidays, more heartaches, more healing. You've seen how people used to be long before the wounds that now divide them. You might feel that it's your duty to step in, to offer clarity, to bring people back together. But intention doesn't always equal outcome. Take Susan, 72 years old. She watched her 2 adult sons drift apart over the years. It started with small disagreements. Then came the bigger divides: divorce, politics, parenting. For a long time, Susan stayed quiet, but eventually the silence in the family became too loud for her to bear. One evening, when both sons happened to sit at the same dinner table for the first time in years, she broke. With a trembling voice, she said, "You both need to grow up. What she meant was, I love you both. I miss what we had." What came across instead, a verdict, an accusation. One son left the table, the other said nothing for weeks. What Susan didn't realize is that in trying to heal, she had picked a side. And from that day on, her place at the center of the family felt more like a fault line. This isn't rare. Seniors carry authority, whether we want to or not. When we speak into conflict, our words don't land gently. They land with weight. Even if our hearts are pure, we can quickly become part of the problem in their eyes. Worse still, after the fight dies down, what they remember may not be the conflict, but what we said in the middle of it. That's why so many wise elders learn the quiet art of what I call selective silence. It's not avoidance, it's not fear, it's care. It's choosing peace over the need to be right. It's knowing that saying, "I trust you'll work this out," holds far more healing than saying, "You were wrong." Because at the end of the day, your role in the family isn't to referee. It's to be the safe place everyone can return to, the steady root, the calm in the storm. And if you give too many opinions too quickly, that trust can be lost. They stop seeing you as the one who holds the family together and start seeing you as someone else to argue with. And eventually, they may stop coming altogether. That's a heartbreak many seniors don't talk about. The quiet exile that comes from being too involved in things you were never meant to fix. So if you're tempted to say something about your daughter's husband, your son's parenting, your granddaughter's choices, pause. Ask yourself, will this bring healing or will it add fuel to the fire? Sometimes the kindest thing we can offer isn't advice, it's presence. Now that brings us to another kind of truth we wrestle with in later years. One even more personal than opinions: regret. The older we get, the more moments we collect. Some beautiful, some bittersweet, some we wish we could rewrite. And it's natural to want to speak those regrets aloud, especially to the ones we love. To say, "I wish I had been there more," or "I wish I had followed my dream." But here's the hard truth about regret. It doesn't always land the way you think it will. Imagine telling your daughter, "I should have spent more time at home when you were little." You mean, "I'm sorry, I carry this with me"? But what she hears might be, "Your childhood wasn't enough." Or telling your son, "I regret not moving abroad when I had the chance." What you're trying to say is, "I've learned something about risk." What he hears may be, "Our life together wasn't enough for you." That's not what you meant, but it's what lingers. Because regret, when spoken without care, becomes someone else's burden. And sometimes it's not fair. Saying to your spouse, "I still think about someone from long ago." What good does that do? Telling your child, "I wish I'd never taken that job," when that job paid for their future. What are they supposed to do with that truth? It becomes theirs when it was never meant to be. That's why some reflections are best kept private. Not out of shame, but out of love. There's nothing wrong with writing it down, praying on it, talking to a counselor or a trusted friend. But not every sorrow needs to be passed on to your children. Healing doesn't require confession. It requires intention. And if you do choose to speak a regret out loud, speak it gently. Wrap it in gratitude. I've thought a lot about my past. I've learned some things, but I'm proud of where we are, and I'm grateful for the life we've shared. That opens hearts, not wounds, because here's the truth. Your words carry weight now, more than ever. And that's not a burden. Not everything needs to be said to be known. Not every truth needs to be heard to have meaning. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is pause, breathe, and choose silence. Not as avoidance, but as wisdom. Because at this age, you know something younger folks haven't quite learned yet. Real peace doesn't come from saying everything. It comes from saying the right things at the right time with the right heart. And sometimes it comes from simply being there, quiet, kind, and full of love. There's a silence that only age can teach you. It's not the silence of loneliness or of things unsaid. It's the silence of clarity. After you've lived through love, disappointment, joy, illness, victory, regret, and rebirth, again and again, you begin to understand that not every truth is meant for every ear. Some truths are like delicate glass. They lose their strength the more hands they pass through. And when it comes to our legacy, our finances, our plans for the future, and what we intend to leave behind, that silence becomes not only wise, but vital. In this final part of our series on the 5 personal things you should keep to yourself after 65, we come to perhaps the most sensitive subject of all: inheritance. The money, the property, the plans you've built quietly over decades of sacrifice, hard work, and patient choices. It's one thing to keep financial habits private. It's another to decide who gets what when you're gone. This is where families change, sometimes forever. Let's talk about why the 5th secret you should consider protecting is this: the full extent of your financial situation, including your inheritance plans. You might think that transparency is the responsible choice, that telling your children, your grandchildren, your siblings, or your nieces what they can expect one day will give them peace of mind. And in some cases that might be true. But in far more families than we like to admit, that transparency does something else. It awakens expectations, changes behavior, and introduces stress into relationships that were once rooted in love. Take Henry, a retired school principal. At 73, he decided to get his estate in order. He wanted no confusion, no legal battles, no misunderstandings. So one Sunday afternoon over lunch, he told his 3 adult children exactly what they would inherit. Who would get the lake house? How much money each one would receive? Who would be in charge of what? He believed this would bring them relief. Instead, it created distance. His eldest daughter, who had always been close, began calling less. The youngest son, once easygoing, started suggesting how Henry should simplify his finances. Even the middle child, who had never cared much about money, began making subtle comments about fairness. And warmth was gone. What Henry didn't understand is that money, when made visible, shifts the atmosphere. No longer just about family, it's about math, worth, comparison. Even love begins to be measured. A $50,000 0 cents difference here, a piece of land there, and suddenly what once felt like unity becomes accounting. According to a 2021 report by the National Endowment for Financial Education, over 68% of American families report tension, arguments, or estrangement following discussions about inheritance, before any estate is even distributed. The reason? Once future money enters the room, people start looking at each other differently. The future becomes a battlefield for imagined fairness. And here's the harsh reality: the more your family knows, the more they might feel entitled to advise you, even control you while you're still alive. They may push you to adjust your plans, reconstrue your distribution, or make you feel guilty for how you intend to leave what's yours. That's why one of the most peaceful choices you can make is to handle your affairs privately, intentionally, and with legal support, but without broadcasting the details to the entire family. Here's how you do that with dignity. First, make sure you have a solid estate plan. A will, a living trust if appropriate, clear beneficiaries, a financial power of attorney, medical directives. These are not just paperwork. They're your voice when you can no longer speak. Second, work with a professional, an estate lawyer or certified financial planner. Not a cousin, not your neighbor, not a well-meaning friend from church. A neutral, experienced person whose only job is to help you protect you. Third, if you feel someone in the family needs to know something specific, like who will handle your estate or where your documents are stored, tell only what's essential, not the numbers, not the full distribution, just the basics. And fourth, resist the pressure to justify your choices. You don't have to explain why one child receives more, or why you've chosen to support a cause, or a friend in your will. You are not giving a presentation. You are making a decision with a lifetime of context behind it. And that context belongs to you. Now, some might say, but if I don't tell them now, won't they be upset later? The truth is, maybe. But it's far easier to navigate grief and confusion after a loved one passes than to live in tension and judgment while they're still alive. And there's another truth, one that older adults often feel but don't speak aloud. Once your family knows you have money, your decisions may no longer feel entirely yours. That trip you want to take, that donation you'd like to make, the new furniture, the spa day, the upgraded car. Every dollar you spend becomes a calculation in their minds. Dollars they think should be saved for later. Suddenly, you are not just a parent or grandparent. You are an estate in progress, a future bank account, a walking ledger. And that is the deepest loss of all, the loss of your identity as a living person, replaced by their expectations of your debt. But your life is still yours. Your story is still unfolding. You deserve to enjoy what you've built, to spend, give, share, or protect what you've earned with joy, not guilt. Quiet discretion about your financial legacy isn't secrecy, it's self-respect. It's emotional freedom, and it's a final act of peace toward the people you love. Now let's take a step back and reflect. Throughout this journey, we've uncovered 5 powerful truths that those over 65 may wish to hold close. Not out of secrecy, but as acts of wisdom, self-respect, and emotional freedom. 1. Your full financial details. The what, where, and how much. 2. The non-urgent parts of your health journey. 3. Your unfiltered opinions about family conflict. 4. The deepest regrets you carry from the past. 5. The exact plans for your inheritance and legacy. Each of these truths carries power, and with that power comes responsibility. We are not saying you must carry these things alone. Not at all. But you have the right to choose when, how, and with whom they are shared. And most importantly, you have the right to choose silence. Not as avoidance, but as protection. Because your peace matters, your privacy matters, and your dignity in these final decades is something worth defending with quiet strength. There's an old quote, one that has lived quietly in the hearts of wise elders for generations. You don't have to say everything you think, and you don't have to explain everything you feel. You've earned the right to speak with care. And sometimes the most powerful thing a senior can say is nothing at all. Just a steady presence, a gentle smile, and a life lived with intention. So wherever you are in this journey, whether 66 or 86, may you feel comfort in knowing that silence is not empty. It is full of love, clarity, and the strength that comes only with time. You are not less valuable because you are older. You are more precious. You are not forgotten. You are a living book of wisdom. And the pages you choose to keep closed are just as sacred as the ones you share. If this message spoke to you, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below with a single thought you plan to carry forward, or a truth you've decided to keep for yourself. Your story may be private, but your voice is still welcome. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, deeply reflective, grounded in senior health, elderly inspiration, and life lessons from those who've walked the long road, consider subscribing and sharing this video, because someone you know might be carrying their own quiet story and need to hear that they're not alone. And may the wisdom you've earned never be questioned.